Hey, what's up, you guys? Bloody Jacob here to bring you my weekly review of The Strain on FX. This week we've seen Season 3, Episode 7, which is called Collaborators. And, overall, I thought this is a, pretty good episode. I do think it was one of the weaker ones of the season, if we're being honest here, but, again, though, that's in comparison to, episodes like Firstborn and, Battle of Central Park, and some of the other really good ones we've had this season. But I'd say despite it being a condensed season, this is probably one of our more like I don't want to say filler episodes, but one of the ones they sort of just got us by. It's not as of high importance as some of the other ones we've seen so far. But it did have some, pretty interesting stuff, especially when it came to Fett. I thought some of the backstory and flashbacks we got to, a certain member of his family is pretty interesting, especially how Kevin Durand acted it out with, Fett talking about it, and, sort of how Setrakian sort of helped him sort of cope about a certain thing in this. And I also liked, Eph, Dutch, and Quinlan working together in this one. I think they're quite the trio. But we'll talk more about that in a few minutes. And then we also had Palmer trying to make some, a little more movements against the Master. But yeah, so we start the episode, the opening scene, we see Eichorst. He's basically cauterizing his wound, or his, of course, hand is decapitated by Dutch last week. So he had to, find somebody to get it to, quit at least. And he's, kind of ashamed of it, We see when he approaches Palmer a little bit later, he's hiding it, He doesn't want to be seen that he was actually, wounded or, hurt in any way, It'll show weakness or, a possibility of, going against them. So that's good. Then we get these flashbacks throughout the episode. We go back to the World War II era. Like we've seen with a lot of the Setrakian stuff in the previous seasons. Except we're not following Setrakian, we're actually following ancestor of Fett's. Or I don't know if I should say ancestor, but it turns out to be his great grandfather, and who had actually went through the Holocaust as well. We even seen Eichorst. I thought it was a little bit confusing because, I guess Fett's grandfather or great grandfather and Setrakian were at the same camp. If Eichorst was dealing with both of them, I guess so, because Eichorst can't get around that fast. But then again, it could easily be just another camp, not too far off or something like that. I don't know. But either way, it was still kind of cool to see Eichorst in that role. He's a perfect Nazi butler. Richard Samuel displays that really well. It's very eerie, and I do like how they film it with the uniforms and stuff like that. It's very poorly accurate to how that time period was, I think, without delving into it too much. We'll talk more about that in a few minutes. Like I said, we also had Eph, Dutch, and Quinlan working together, when they show Quinlan the research they have with the communications, with the Master and such, and how they actually plan on going back to the JFK airport, to get this communications log type of thing during the night where the plane first landed, which turns out to be a pretty cool, tie back to Season 1. Then we actually had a little bit more of a personal touch to this episode, with stuff kind of about Fett's past, or not so much Fett's past, but his family's. We had Fett actually go back to his parents' apartment and trying to check on them. Finally, he's seen he's seen a scene with his father. I think it was back in Season 1 actually, where he went and actually checked on him. His mother was out at the time, but we seen they still had some unresolved issues between each other, and they do find his parents' bodies. And it looks like they're infecting with certain wounds on the neck, a certain puncture, and it looks like they shot themselves before they turned, which of course is better than the alternative, because when Fett initially thinks they just shot themselves just right when everything was starting, Fett sort of says his father is a coward for doing that, but then Setrakian points out how they were infected, so it was really an act of mercy, towards his mother. And I really like that throughout the episode. It kind of set up like a little, like parental dynamic between Setrakian and Fett. Maybe Setrakian's in a way sort of like a father figure, and I think he is kind of like that for a lot of the characters, but I think this kind of helped that a little bit more, because I've seen parallels between Fett and Setrakian before, and I think it's kind of playing out well this episode. And of course Palmer's health is still declining, and he finds out that he supposedly approved of this cargo to be arriving on one of his ships, but it turned out to be a forged signature. Of course, with Eichorst seeing Palmer's lack of cooperation lately, of course he would just go anyway under that, just to keep on using Palmer's influence to get what they want for as long as they need. Then we had Setrakian, he kind of presses more on Fett's issue with his father. He says how, they just didn't get along, Fett's career path, how, he had, of course, he heard before that Fett had this, like, scholarship or this straight ticket to, be this great architect or something. And of course he chose, exterminating, and again, I sort of like that dynamic between Setrakian and Fett. I'm glad they're sort of emphasizing that a little bit more. And then it turns out, that Fett's father's real reason for it is, or at least his, what he held against Fett all these years is that, the tie back to what the great-grandfather had to do, and that was how he was actually, of course, he was a Ukrainian, so he was a type of ambassador in a way, I guess, and what he had to do is he was actually forced to, shoot some of the Jews and, other people who were held at concentration camps and stuff like that, and he ended up killing himself as well, apparently, and this is something that, Fett's actual father, he could just not shake for, a long time, I don't think anyone could, with that type of event, and so when Fett's father had heard that he was going to go into exterminating, it made him think of that. So it brought up some, unpleasant ties back to, their past and such. Which I understand, it made it feel a little bit more personal, a little bit more real with that explanation, I think. But at the same time, Fett he's exterminating rats, bugs, things like that. I don't know, it just didn't really work. I'm sorry, but like exterminating cockroaches and rats or something like that isn't quite the same as genocide back in the 30s and 40s. So, but I did sort of feel for it, and I will give a lot of credit to Kevin Durand's acting as he was telling Setrakian about it. Kevin Durand's a very good actor. I've really liked him for a while now. Not just in The Strain, but also in a good, pretty good independent horror movie called Dark Was the Night. You should check it out. Really good suspenseful type of horror film. The payoff, is a little bit questionable, but Kevin Durand's just a really good actor, and I would have been a little bit more bothered by that explanation if it wasn't that I felt for Fett so much in the scene, which I did, thanks to Kevin Durand's performance, which was very good. Let's see, and as Dutch, Eph, and Quinlan are on their way to the JFK, they come across this couple. I think it was a couple being robbed, and of course Dutch stops the car and she wants to step out and help them, and this turns into a little bit of a standoff, and this basically just forces Quinlan to slaughter all of them, which is cool. He just uses a sword within like a few seconds. They're all dead, and of course the couple, they ran off. They weren't grateful. They're just probably pretty freaked out by Quinlan, especially. And Quinlan says savagery is the default state of humanity. No civility is dead. Now they're just in that same default state, which is psychologically interesting and sort of true for humanity in a way when you think about it. Let's see. And they do get to JFK, and I like the feeling here. We haven't been at that location in a while, especially since, in particular since the series started. So it really brought up, almost nostalgia in a way, at least for Eph especially, because, he just thinks about how he could have taken more measures earlier on, that maybe he could have stopped things sooner or done something to, go against it sooner, listened to Setrakian as he should have initially. and he just sort of says how basically maybe Nora and Jim would still be alive at this point. Just everything is lost, so of course it's weighing on him. And just them walking through the JFK, it felt very eerie, and I really liked that. Then we had Palmer and Eichorst sort of having a pretty hostile meeting, and of course Eichorst is aware of Palmer trying to look into the ship and such. And let's see, Palmer still emphasizes that the Master might have some sort of plan, must have some sort of plan for him, because he's kept him alive for this long. And the Master never forgets anything, right? So it seems like he has something else in mind for Palmer in the future, and this sort of grinds Eichorst's gears, because he does heavily dislike Palmer, but he's had to deal with him for so long because of the Master's wishes. And why or what the plan is for Palmer, I don't know. Maybe he's going to be the vessel to the Master or something like that. He's seen in some of the flashbacks, the Master apparently likes using old dudes as vessels, so maybe it's a possibility. But I think the Master would probably pick like a more of like a body like Bolivar, for example. I think he'll pick more of like a healthy, sort of a more attractive body or something like that. I don't know, not like CW or anything like that, but I don't think Palmer's going to be the vessel, but it does make sense. I think Palmer is probably right that the Master would have probably disposed of him at this point if there's no further use for him, so it is kind of a question why he is still alive. And Palmer sort of asks Eichorst about his hand. Of course Eichorst doesn't want to say anything about that. Palmer ends up assaulting the ship. He ends up having his new bodyguard, getting these men together to try and take it. They get there, but then everyone's dead and the ship's empty. So it's obviously a pretty big secret, a pretty big cargo they're hauling in there. And then once we see Setrakian and Palmer meet up later, as Palmer tells Setrakian about it, we find out from Setrakian as he's talking to Fed after they leave that it could be the Master actually bringing in some ancients from the other side of the world, the others that he hadn't been able to deal with yet, and maybe just to kill them. I don't know how aware he is of the ones that Quinlan's been having to deal with, at least somewhat lately, but I think that is probably most likely correct. And then I told you about the flashbacks. And then again, we get really, more of that really strong acting from Kevin Durand. I just wanted to touch on it again. He sort of describes, how his original name was, Petrovsky, and his father just felt so much shame over that after what his great grandfather did, and the shame he brought to the family name, so he shortened it to Fet. That's why his name's Vasily Fet, not Vasily Petrovsky. And then, Setrakian sort of comforts him, and he sort of urges him that he has to, in a way, forgive his father. He gives this quote, "To forgive is to set the prisoner free, and that prisoner is Fet." Just sort of find closure and make peace with himself, and sort of just all this weight he's been holding because of it. Again, just really strong acting. I just don't really buy that Fet exterminating rats would be. Just because it's exterminating doesn't mean it's on that same level. It's rats, man. But that's his father. And again, I do get the trauma behind it. I just don't think it should have been as closely tied to Fet's choice of exterminating vermin. But yeah, I guess in a way that weirdly bizarrely parallels that, but it's obviously not the same thing. Let's see. And of course, Eph and Dutch are able to find the what they needed to listen to the communications during the night of the flight back in the premiere. Let's see. And like I said, Palmer does tell Setrakian about the cargo, and Setrakian does hand him over the white, and Palmer does end up taking the white, and at first it does nothing, and he thinks the old man tricked me. And then, of course, he does drop, and blood comes out through his eyes, and Nurse panics, and she basically quits. I think she ran off and saying, "I quit," when he pops back up. But he'll probably be pretty happy about that. So yeah, that's mostly what happened in the episode. Like I said, not quite as eventful or as important as other episodes have been this season. If anything, this is probably one of our more carryover episodes if we have any this season. But at the same time, it wasn't a bad episode either. Very strong acting from Kevin Durand. Although I understood his father's trauma, I didn't really buy into the explanation that he tied it so closely to Fet's exterminating rats. But, the flashbacks are nonetheless always very good to see, just with us, Eichorst, just really good way they put that together. And I liked going back to JFK and such, and it's definitely a sign of bigger things to come for sure, especially with whatever that cargo was. So yeah, overall I did really like the episode, despite it being probably one of the lessers of the season so far. I still did enjoy it. It's a strain. It's always good to an extent. So I'm going to give this episode about an 8.2 out of 10, I think. I talked about why. But yeah, I still did like it. Looking forward to next week as always. And my shameless review for tonight will be coming in just a little bit. Catch you guys for that. Follow me on Facebook, Twitter, like, subscribe, and peace.